What happens when a flight attendant judges a humble Filipina passenger, unaware she's a skilled nurse who might save a life? How will Sophia react when confronted by blatant discrimination at 30,000 feet? Can one courageous act change everything? Find out in today's inspiring story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more touching life lessons. The cabin of the international flight from Paris to Seattle hummed with life as passengers boarded, filling the aisles with eager anticipation. The gentle murmur of conversations blended with occasional laughter, punctuated by the rhythmic clicking of overhead bins snapping shut. Flight attendants maneuvered skillfully among the bustling travelers, offering polite greetings and managing seat assignments with practiced efficiency. Amidst this vibrant scene stood Sophia Cruz, a humble 32-year-old Filipina nurse, patiently waiting her turn to reach her seat. Her simple attire, a soft, worn-in sweater and comfortable jeans, reflected her modest nature and practical outlook. Unlike many around her carrying large bags stuffed with souvenirs from Europe's fashion capital, Sophia held tightly onto a small, carefully packed bag containing treasures of a different kind. This small, unassuming bag was her most cherished possession, filled not with expensive gifts or clothing, but rather heartfelt letters written by grateful patients, small handmade trinkets given to her by children she had nursed back to health, and photographs capturing precious memories from the last 6 months. Sophia had spent that time volunteering in a remote, impoverished African village, providing critical medical care to communities that rarely saw outside help. As she inched forward, Sophia's thoughts briefly wandered to the faces she'd left behind, the bright, hopeful smiles of children once feverish and weak, now healthy and strong, the relieved, grateful tears of mothers who had feared losing their loved ones. She felt a gentle warmth fill her chest, a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude for the opportunity she'd had to impact so many lives. Yet, her heart ached with a quiet melancholy, already missing the simple yet profound connections she'd built. Finally reaching her seat, situated in economy class, tucked neatly by a window toward the back of the plane, Sophia carefully placed her treasured bag beneath the seat in front of her. Settling into her seat, she sighed deeply, allowing herself to relax for the first time in weeks. She glanced out the window, watching as the ground crew moved methodically beneath the enormous wings of the aircraft, preparing for the long flight ahead. As Sophia gazed thoughtfully out at the Parisian skyline in the distance, a gentle sense of excitement began to take hold. After 6 long months away, she was finally returning home, eager to reunite with her family in Seattle. Closing her eyes, she silently hoped for a restful journey, completely unaware that the flight ahead would challenge her in ways she had never anticipated. Settling into her modest economy class seat, Sophia felt relieved to finally relax after navigating through the crowded aisle. Her seat was positioned toward the rear of the plane, tucked beside a small oval window that offered a comforting view of the busy airport tarmac. Through the glass, she watched baggage carts hurry past, reflecting quietly on the journey behind her and the life that awaited at home. Sophia had just begun to shift her belongings carefully beneath her seat when sharp, brisk footsteps echoed in the narrow aisle, approaching rapidly from the front of the plane. Sophia glanced up instinctively to see Jessica, the lead flight attendant, walking toward her with an air of authoritative impatience. Jessica, a tall, slender woman with neatly styled blonde hair tied into a flawless bun, wore an expression of thinly veiled irritation. Her icy blue eyes scanned the aisle coldly, barely acknowledging passengers seated nearby. Jessica stopped abruptly beside Sophia, placing one hand firmly on the seat back in front of her, leaning in slightly as she stared down with unmistakable annoyance. "Excuse me, miss," Jessica said curtly, her voice laced with impatience, "but you're holding up the aisle. Can you please hurry it up?" Taken aback by the abrupt tone, Sophia quickly realized Jessica was speaking directly to her. She blinked, momentarily startled, then quickly composed herself, offering the flight attendant a polite, conciliatory smile. "I'm sorry," Sophia replied softly, her voice gentle and sincere. "I'm almost finished." But Jessica didn't relent. With an exaggerated sigh loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear, she continued, openly addressing no one in particular, yet clearly directing her criticism toward Sophia. "Economy passengers," Jessica muttered sharply, her voice dripping with condescension. "Always causing delays, every single flight." A few passengers nearby glanced curiously toward Sophia, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and quiet disapproval. Sophia could feel her cheeks warming slightly under the scrutiny. Despite the sting of embarrassment, she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced countless situations during her volunteer mission where patience and humility had been her strongest allies. This was no different. Without responding to Jessica's dismissive remark, Sophia calmly adjusted her belongings beneath the seat, making certain everything was secure before quietly settling back into her seat. Her dignity intact, she turned her attention back to the window, deliberately avoiding the sharp gaze of the irritated flight attendant. Jessica lingered briefly, as if waiting for Sophia to react or respond further. When no confrontation came, she straightened herself sharply, smoothing out invisible creases in her uniform, and moved forward toward the front of the plane, her voice softening considerably as she addressed other passengers seated in business class. Sophia took a slow, deep breath, deliberately releasing the tension that had momentarily gripped her chest. Encounters like this were unfortunately not new to her. She was well acquainted with subtle prejudice and quiet disdain hidden behind polite smiles and sharp words. Yet, she reminded herself gently, her purpose in life was never defined by the judgments of others, nor would it be diminished by a rude remark or cold glance. Her experiences in the remote village had taught her that strength lay not in confrontation, but in dignity and compassion. Lessons she carried close to her heart as the plane began to roll gently toward the runway, taking her closer to home and unknowingly toward the unexpected trials still ahead. Several hours into the flight, the initial bustle settled into a steady calm. The gentle hum of engines filled the cabin as passengers drifted into sleep, watched movies, or read quietly beneath the soft glow of overhead lights. Sophia, unable to fully relax after her unpleasant encounter with Jessica, flipped quietly through the letters and photos in her small bag, finding comfort in familiar faces and heartfelt words. Each picture held a memory, each note a reminder of the lives she'd touched. Just as Sophia's eyelids began to grow heavy with fatigue, a sudden commotion erupted from the aisle, jolting her wide awake. Passengers around her craned their necks, voices rising in alarm and confusion. Sophia's pulse quickened instinctively. Years of nursing had honed her sensitivity to distress signals, and her body reacted immediately. Toward the center of the economy cabin, William Anderson, a 75-year-old American man returning home after visiting his grandchildren in Paris, had collapsed onto the carpeted aisle. The frail man grasped at his chest in visible agony, his breathing harsh and labored. His pale, wrinkled face twisted in pain, eyes wide with panic as fellow passengers jumped from their seats, crowding around him with worried expressions. Jessica and her fellow flight attendants raced toward William, their professional composure quickly giving way to evident uncertainty and fear. Jessica knelt awkwardly beside him, fumbling for words and clearly struggling to recall her emergency procedures. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice wavering, losing its earlier authority. Her usual confident demeanor crumbled beneath the weight of genuine crisis. William barely managed a weak nod, his fingers clutching desperately at his chest, breath escaping in short, shallow gasps. Jessica glanced desperately toward her crew members, who mirrored her own frightened uncertainty. Around them, tension rippled swiftly through the cabin, passengers exchanging anxious whispers, questions, and fears mounting rapidly. Sophia watched the scene closely, her instincts screaming at her to move. She recognized the symptoms immediately: severe chest pain, pale complexion, shortness of breath, classic signs of a heart attack. Sophia's grip tightened reflexively around the edges of her seat. Her entire body urged her forward, yet Jessica's earlier hostility held her momentarily in place, an unspoken hesitation gripping her heart. "Does anyone have medical experience?" Jessica called loudly, her voice cracking slightly, desperation seeping through her tone. Passengers looked helplessly at one another, uncertainty clear on their faces. Jessica's panicked eyes darted around, clearly unprepared for such an emergency. William's condition was visibly deteriorating, his breathing growing weaker, his skin taking on a terrifyingly gray pallor. Each passing second felt like an eternity, intensifying the urgency as the elderly man's consciousness began slipping away. Sophia's pulse hammered fiercely in her chest. Hesitation was no longer an option. Pushing aside any lingering doubt, Sophia rose swiftly to her feet. Her voice cut clearly and calmly through the confusion, instantly drawing attention from those nearby. "I'm a nurse," she announced firmly, stepping forward. Passengers quickly made way for her, relief spreading visibly across their faces as they sensed her competence and strength. Jessica turned abruptly toward Sophia, startled recognition flickering briefly across her face, quickly replaced by lingering suspicion. Her gaze shifted uncertainly, her initial reluctance obvious. But William's weakening condition gave her no choice. The seriousness of the moment left no room for personal prejudice. "Please," Sophia urged softly but firmly, meeting Jessica's eyes with unwavering confidence. "Let me help him." Jessica hesitated for just a heartbeat, wrestling internally between pride and necessity. Finally, acknowledging her own inadequacy in handling the escalating crisis, she silently stepped aside, allowing Sophia to kneel swiftly at William's side. Immediately, Sophia's professional training took control. Calm and purposeful, she quickly assessed William's condition, placing gentle fingers on his wrist to check his pulse, confirming its alarming weakness. Her composed voice and confident demeanor rapidly calmed those around her, turning panic into hopeful silence. "Bring me the emergency medical kit immediately," Sophia instructed Jessica firmly, but without harshness. Jessica nodded hurriedly, moving to comply, visibly relieved to relinquish responsibility to someone clearly capable. As Sophia worked to stabilize William, passengers around them watched with rapt attention, admiration and relief growing in their eyes. Yet despite Sophia's decisive actions, William's condition remained critical, his shallow breathing and fading consciousness a constant reminder that the crisis was far from over. Inside the cabin, tension hung thick in the air, each passenger silently praying for the elderly man's survival, placing their trust entirely in the humble nurse who, until moments ago, had gone unnoticed by nearly everyone on board. "I'm a nurse, let me help." Sophia's voice cut through the chaotic tension of the cabin, firm yet reassuring, commanding instant attention. Jessica froze momentarily, her narrowed eyes betraying skepticism. Her lips parted, hesitant words poised on the tip of her tongue. Doubt flickered in her icy gaze, uncertainty still lingering despite the obvious urgency of the situation. She opened her mouth, her voice edged with suspicion. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" "Yes," Sophia replied without hesitation, her tone unwavering, gaze meeting Jessica's directly. "I've spent over 10 years working emergency cases. Please step aside." The weight of Sophia's determined stare made Jessica falter. The severity of the elderly man's condition, however, left no room for further resistance. Swallowing her pride, Jessica reluctantly stepped aside, making room for Sophia to reach William Anderson, whose condition had rapidly deteriorated. The other flight attendants watched anxiously, visibly relieved to see someone competent finally take control. Sophia quickly knelt beside William, her professional demeanor immediately taking control of the panicked atmosphere. With practiced efficiency, she placed 2 fingers gently against the man's neck, feeling his pulse, weak, thready, but still present. She swiftly checked his breathing patterns, her trained eyes noting every subtle sign of distress. "His pulse is weak and rapid. He's likely experiencing a heart attack," Sophia announced, calmly yet decisively. Turning to Jessica, who hovered nervously nearby, Sophia instructed clearly, "Please bring me the emergency medical kit now and a defibrillator if available. We might need it urgently." Jessica nodded hastily, her skepticism now completely overshadowed by Sophia's evident competence. Jessica's pride melted into reluctant gratitude as she rushed to fetch the requested items, leaving Sophia to guide the rest of the cabin crew through immediate steps necessary to stabilize the patient. Sophia's years of emergency medical training took over completely. Kneeling beside William, she gently reassured him, her voice warm and soothing despite the seriousness of the situation. "You're going to be all right, sir," she comforted, gently holding his wrist. "Just breathe with me slowly and steadily." William's glazed eyes fluttered briefly open, locking onto Sophia's steady gaze. Her calm presence visibly reduced his anxiety, helping him take controlled, shallow breaths. Sophia's quiet confidence seemed infectious, calming passengers and flight attendants alike, the earlier panic gradually dissipating. Jessica returned swiftly with the medical kit, her hands trembling slightly as she handed it to Sophia. Her previous bravado had vanished completely, replaced by uncertainty and guilt. Opening the kit expertly, Sophia administered emergency medication designed to alleviate cardiac stress, calmly explaining each step aloud for the crew's benefit. Her professional competence became unmistakably clear, leaving no room for doubt. Passengers watched in awe, their anxiety gradually turning to hope and admiration, some silently filming the unfolding drama. Within minutes, William's breathing steadied, his pulse strengthening noticeably. Color began returning to his previously pale, ashen face. Gradually, his eyes opened wider, clearer than before, meeting Sophia's reassuring gaze. Relief rippled visibly through the passengers who had gathered anxiously around, their quiet murmurs transforming into expressions of profound gratitude. Jessica remained standing awkwardly to the side, eyes downcast, visibly shaken by her own misjudgments. Witnessing Sophia's swift and confident intervention had forced Jessica to confront her biases head-on, realizing how gravely they could have endangered William's life. Sophia gently propped William's head up with a small pillow brought by another attendant, her actions meticulous yet filled with genuine care. William's breathing slowly steadied, color returning gradually to his pale face. His eyes now fixed upon Sophia, gratitude shining clearly through the exhaustion etched across his features. "You saved my life," William managed weakly, voice thick with emotion. "Just rest," Sophia said kindly, gently squeezing his hand in reassurance. Her humble demeanor never wavered, even as passengers around her whispered praise and admiration, some discreetly capturing the powerful moment on their phones. As the tension dissipated, Jessica quietly withdrew toward the galley, grappling internally with the profound realization that the very person she dismissed and doubted had stepped forward, saving not only William's life, but also the entire crew from potential disaster. Sophia's courage and professional skill had not only reversed the emergency, but had inadvertently forced Jessica to reconsider everything she thought she knew about herself and others. After nearly 20 intense minutes of meticulous medical intervention, William's breathing gradually eased, and color returned slowly to his previously pale face. Sophia knelt beside him, monitoring his pulse and quietly encouraging him, her gentle voice continually guiding him back to consciousness. The once chaotic cabin had grown quiet, all eyes focused on the humble nurse whose calm professionalism had turned near tragedy into miraculous relief. William's eyelids fluttered briefly before slowly opening. His blue eyes, slightly glazed but clearer now, stared upwards, gradually regaining awareness. His gaze eventually settled on Sophia, a flicker of confusion shifting to recognition and deep gratitude. "Am I okay?" William asked softly, voice trembling from exhaustion but laced with hopeful anticipation. Sophia smiled warmly, gently squeezing his frail hand. "You're stable now, Mr. Anderson," she reassured him gently. "Just breathe slowly and rest for now. You'll be fine." A profound wave of relief surged visibly through William, tears glistening in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak again, but found himself momentarily overwhelmed by emotion, his voice catching softly in his throat. The words finally came, earnest and heartfelt. "Thank you so much, Sophia. You saved my life." Around them, passengers quietly began clapping, a gentle applause that soon swelled into a heartfelt, collective expression of gratitude. Voices whispered admiration, murmuring how lucky they had been to have a nurse like Sophia on board. One mother, cradling her small child protectively, wiped away tears of relief, whispering softly, "She's an angel." Sophia felt her cheeks flush lightly, humbled by the unexpected attention. She never sought recognition or praise. To her, saving William's life was simply her duty, born out of compassion and years of dedicated training. Yet, the passengers' gratitude and genuine appreciation warmed her heart more than any accolade could. Standing aside, Jessica quietly watched the emotional scene unfold, shame and guilt heavy on her shoulders. The confident, dismissive persona she'd projected at the flight's beginning now seemed petty and unjustified, dwarfed by Sophia's unwavering humility and competence. Every dismissive remark she had made echoed bitterly in her mind, reminding her how gravely wrong she had been to judge Sophia. As the cabin slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, Jessica took hesitant steps forward, approaching Sophia cautiously, her eyes reflecting deep remorse. Swallowing her pride, she gently offered Sophia a damp towel, her voice noticeably softened. "Thank you," Jessica said quietly, avoiding eye contact out of embarrassment. "I didn't realize. You handled that incredibly well." Sophia accepted the towel graciously, offering Jessica a soft, forgiving smile. Her response was simple and sincere. "It's my job," she replied gently, without bitterness or resentment, demonstrating once more her quiet strength. Jessica lingered for a brief moment longer, struggling internally to articulate her feelings further but unable to find the right words. Eventually, she turned away quietly, returning toward the front of the plane, her posture visibly less rigid, weighed down by newfound self-awareness and remorse. As the atmosphere on board settled into a comfortable calm, Sophia returned quietly to her seat. She felt no need for acknowledgement or applause. Instead, She cherished a deeper, private sense of fulfillment, reaffirmed in her commitment to a profession centered on compassion, dignity, and selflessness. William, resting peacefully now, occasionally glanced toward her with silent gratitude, a gentle reminder of the lasting impact her actions had made. As the aircraft began its gentle descent toward Seattle, the lights in the cabin dimmed softly, signaling passengers to prepare for landing. The hum of engines shifted subtly, and the muffled sounds of passengers gathering belongings filled the air. Sophia sat quietly by her window seat, thoughtfully gazing out at the distant lights of the city below, reflecting deeply on the events of the flight. Her thoughts were interrupted by a hesitant, quiet approach. Sophia turned to see Jessica standing beside her seat, posture noticeably softened, her usual rigid confidence replaced by a vulnerability rarely glimpsed before. The flight attendant's blue eyes were sincere, filled with an earnest remorse that required no words to recognize. "Sophia," Jessica began softly, her voice low and genuinely contrite, "I just wanted to say, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you earlier. It was unfair, inappropriate, and completely wrong of me." Sophia met Jessica's gaze steadily, noting the sincerity evident in her face. Sophia's expression remained kind, without any hint of bitterness or reproach. "Thank you for saying that, Jessica," Sophia responded gently. "I appreciate your honesty." Jessica nodded slowly, clearly relieved but still visibly struggling with her emotions. "I made assumptions about you based on your appearance and other things I shouldn't have. You've shown me how misguided my biases really are." Sophia smiled warmly, gently placing a reassuring hand on Jessica's arm. "We've all made assumptions at some point, but it's essential to remember that a person's worth isn't determined by their appearance, nationality, or status. True value lies in one's character, actions, and heart." This flight reminded us both of that. Jessica exhaled softly, visibly moved by Sophia's graceful wisdom. "You've taught me a valuable lesson I'll never forget," she admitted quietly. As the wheels touched down gently on the runway, Sophia looked back out the window, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had not only saved a life today, but had also touched hearts, subtly changing perceptions. Sophia knew that true healing began in understanding, compassion, and forgiveness, lessons that would remain with everyone on board long after they had left the plane.